night long. Party, party, we like to party, 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 never go home. Party, party, we like to party, 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 all night long. Party, party, we like to party, 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 never go home.
What's up, everyone, and welcome back to episode 19 of the Ball Talk Pod. Tonight we're going to talk, obviously, about the Thunder, but we have some OU football news to discuss. Chris, talk to me about what we know, man.
Yeah, so OU football has hired a new general manager. I guess not a new one,
It's new. Curtis Lofton was the GM.
Oh, he was? Oh,
Yeah.
I thought this was a new position. So we're getting a new GM for OU football. And from what I understand, Ben, it's very exciting. The news around this guy is kind of incredible. He's worked for 4 different NFL programs, including Kansas City and the New England Patriots. He's also been head of the Reese's Senior Bowl for the last several years, kind of expanding that and making that what it is today. Very, very cool addition to the program and reason for excitement around the team that was disappointing last year.
Have we said his name? His name's Jim Nagy.
I haven't said his name. I was going to let you do it.
Yeah, Jim Nagy is the Oklahoma football general manager. And I texted some buddies this after this was announced yesterday. Or was it today? I think it was yesterday.
It was yesterday.
Yesterday. For a program that has not generated a ton of buzz outside of like an upset of Alabama in a game that didn't matter.
Well, bad buzz. We've generated a lot of bad buzz.
This is about as good of a hire you could ask for, given the context of the situation. He's a well-respected guy. He was since 2018. He's been the senior director of the Reese's Senior Bowl, which is kind of like a college all-star game where upperclassmen, mainly seniors, obviously, but the COVID years kind of changed some of that over the last couple years.
Didn't we have 3 guys go this year? Danny Stutzman, Billy
2.
Bowman. Oh, not. I thought Ethan Downs went. He's just going to the combine.
I think it was just 2. I think it was
Billy Bowman and Danny Stutzman.
And then Ethan Downs is at the combine right now.
Right.
But he was in charge of kind of turning that around. It's now a huge deal to get invited to that. It's huge for players' draft stock. As you mentioned, he has a ton of background with NFL agents and scouting, so that not only does he come in with a knowledge of how a front office should look. Now, obviously, it's not apples to apples with it being the NFL to college football, and it's still very preliminary across the entire country. I mean, everyone will have a GM at some point, I think, but not a lot of people currently do, at least as open about it as some others. I mean, I know North Carolina has one. Bill Belichick, the first thing he did was hire a GM just because of how college football shifted from, I mean, you don't even sign an NIL anymore, or a NLI, National Letter of Intent. It's just like a financial agreement whenever National Signing Day comes about. But Nagy's experience,
binding. That financial agreement's not binding in a lot of cases.
Correct.
You can get out of it.
Correct. So it's not as much of a sure thing anymore whenever someone signs with you in December or February that they're going to be on campus. It's still pretty sure. Right. Oh, you didn't, like, I haven't heard anything that would cause concern for that, because so many players now are enrolling early anyway.
Right.
But his connections around the NFL, his connections around the college football world and the scouting world, going out and finding these players to participate in this game, because it's not just big name players that like big universities that send players to this. It's across the country, regardless of size. I mean, I'm sure he had a team, but he was a huge reason in bringing in the talent that they did. And what I think is interesting, and I think probably the most key point, is that he is almost like a standalone position in terms of, hypothetically, this year goes poorly, the 2025 OU football season, and Brent's gone. And we know that's like decently likely to happen. But if that does happen,
slow down.
If that does happen,
okay, all right. Let's talk hypothetically.
hypothetically, if Brent or whatever, if we have a new head coach next year, Nagy is not tied to Brent. Nagy is his own person. It's his own position. And I'm assuming he would have as much or more of a say and impact on who the next hire would be than anyone other than Joe Castiglione. It's almost just like in the NFL where you have the owner of a team. They're in charge of hiring the general manager who then takes care of football ops. So almost view Joe C as an owner. We hired a GM. And Nagy's basically going to be the guy who negotiates contracts in the NIL world. He's going out and scouting around the country. Maybe not him specifically, but he is going to build out a team and a staff under him as like a true front office for a college football program. I mean, we'll see how it all works out. I mean, the thing that sucks is Curtis Lofton was in the position, as I mentioned. He was fine. I mean, it's a position that you don't really see the successes and the negatives of it outside of the football team wasn't great.
Right.
But Curtis Lofton gave an interview like right after he left, and it wasn't like, oh, you asked him to leave. From my understanding, it might have been mutual, but he said he had a calling to get into ministry, and so he's that's what he's doing in Oklahoma City now. But an interview he gave after he left was basically saying like kind of the old school mindset of like, you don't want that player that's just in it for the paycheck. And although that might be true to an extent, welcome to 2025 in the college football world where all these kids don't even need the McDonald's bag full of cash anymore. People could just walk up and hand them cash and it'd be completely legal and no repercussions on their eligibility.
Is it completely legal?
Well, they're not going to do anything now. The NCAA has no power.
Oh, I was just wondering about the field in Alabama.
Oh, we don't have to get into that. But all in all, this is the biggest hire that you could have as an OU football program. And it's not even in its current state. I think if OU had won a national championship last year and was going to hire a general manager, I think this is the guy you would want.
I think you're right.
Because he was even interviewing for like NFL GM positions.
Right. Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head with his like connections and his like deep. I think it matches with Brent so well in the fact that Brent's always been sort of that guy that can like see talent in a guy that's not really highly recruited. I think these two are going to be able to really find some diamonds in the rough. But it also, I think the most important thing is it allows Brent to do what we know he's good at. We know Brent's a good defensive coach. We know he's a good defensive play caller. Instead of having to worry about what's he paying kids, kind of like going and like looking for people. He can he can trust that Jim Nagy is going to go out and find those diamonds in the rough and find the kids that are, good enough to play at OU. He can focus on what we know he's good at. And I think that's really going to help the football on the field excel. You know what I mean?
What I'm curious to see, and you're absolutely right, is one, it's been said for so long now, especially in the years that we've had recently. Brent wears too many hats and does too many things, is way too involved in every little detail everywhere, and he's spread way too thin. So Nagy's able, like the hope is that Nagy's really the one that's doing like the heavy lifting when it comes to recruiting, and specifically, I think like negotiating NIL and understanding where value is and where to stretch your budget. And I also think the hope is that he's able to like get people to donate, and be the face of that. Because Brent's not that. Like, and he doesn't necessarily have to be. I'd never have loved the coaches that are like in their press conferences, like Gundy called out his donors for being poor, and that went horribly at OSU. And Brent really hasn't talked about that. I mean, I don't think OU spends money. Like it feels like OU's poor because we don't have, the Georgia Bulldog defensive line, but you paid money to get Danny Stutzman to come back for a year when he had already decided to go to the NFL last year. Billy Bowman came back a year. You won a massive defensive line transfer portal battle last year for Dominic Williams out of TCU, who was a freshman All-American. He came in, had a great year for OU, and he's back again.
Mm-hmm.
He stayed, not because he had a bad year, but because we're paying him enough. And then I think the biggest one is like John Mateer, your incoming,
right,
hopeful next great Sooner quarterback. That was probably the most expensive player in the portal this year across the country.
Right.
And OU obviously had their back against the wall. We had their OC. So things had to happen and did work out for OU in that situation. But OU's been competitive on those fronts. And I'm hoping that this just springboards that. And it's just going to be interesting to see how this plays out for 2 to 3 years.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think if he can get, like you said, we've been competitive, but more money is more money, and that's going to help us even more, right? So if he can bring in extra money, that's great for the program. My other question is, like, do you think this is going to help, like, the development of our assistant coaches as well? Them not having to worry about so much about, like, planning travel and, like, looking at so much film. They're just going to be able to really focus on development on the field. Or do they have much of that, like, in their basket anyways?
I think every coach will benefit from this. How much is obviously to be determined. No one actually knows. No one knows if he's actually going to be a good GM. You just look at what's on paper and you think all is good. The thing with the coaches is I think a lot of them probably feel like either A, Brett might have them working too much in terms of looking at film, coaching, and then also recruiting. But B, I mean, we have good recruiters on the staff that probably don't want to give up that much control over that. And to me, I don't think they should have a choice. Every coach in that front office has to have 100% of their energy, effort, focus into the product that's on the football field for the Oklahoma Sooners this fall. Because, it's an awkward situation right now when you read about recruiting for next year. And it's kind of similar for the basketball team if Porter Moser gets fired. All these recruits that you have signed, whatever. All these recruits that you have signed for next year, if you fire a head coach, just scrap it.
Right.
It's hard, and you have to it's arguably the most important football season for the University of Oklahoma since I don't know when. I don't even think it's arguable.
Since 1999 when Bob Stoops stepped in.
I think that's I was trying to think if maybe it was Lincoln's year, but we had success. I mean, we weren't finishing sub 500 2 out of 3 years, let alone 1 year.
Right.
But again, we said it when we started this pod, when we started talking a little bit about OU football. It's getting to the point where I'm starting to believe.
Ben, I've been believing, and I want you to jump on the train with me.
I mean, I don't know to what extent yet. Spring ball starts in a couple weeks, and then the spring games in April.
Spring ball starts next week.
Oh, is it like March 6th?
March 7th. March 6th.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you'll start seeing clips from practice.
Yeah, that'll get you hyped.
Yeah.
Practice clips.
So not only that, I mean, going back to your question, I think coaches hopefully are able to, just focus more on what's on the field and what they're doing in practice. And not to say that they weren't doing that before, but everyone knows that every hat you wear spreads you even thinner.
Right. You can't half-ass stuff. You got to full-ass one thing. And I hope they're full-assing the field stuff this year.
They need, how they do themed shirts, with sayings on them? They need that one. They need that
full-ass.
Don't half-ass anything, full-ass one thing. And that's winning football games.
Half-ass a lot of things, full-ass winning the football game.
Whatever it is, make it sound good, put it on a shirt. Let's go win some football games in Norman, Oklahoma.
That's right. Boomer.
But yeah, huge news for OU football. And like we said, spring practice is coming up, so there'll be a lot of stuff coming down the pipeline for OU football. We're going to keep it kind of short tonight. I mean, we're not done yet. We're going to talk about one more thing. But it's late, and honestly, the Thunder have only had one game since we last talked, and there hasn't been a ton happening outside of that. But the Thunder, coming off that loss to the Timberwolves, which was, I guess, crushing mentally for a while. They
For
bounced back
some
and beat
people.
the Brooklyn Nets last night, 129 to 121,
Yeah,
in a
they kind
game
of.
that they got down 18 in the first quarter.
I was about to say they kind of bounced like a dead fish the first half. I mean, they really came out and just looked flat.
And Brooklyn couldn't miss.
That's true. When I was listening on the radio to some parts, or to I think the start of the second half, and all of a sudden Brooklyn was 16 of 32 from three, and just showed no sign of slowing down, just making every shot, which is tough. And it's nice to know that the Thunder kind of stayed in it and ended up winning, but like Brooklyn looked unstoppable. That's the Cam Johnson everyone wanted on the team.
It is, and I also think a key point in that, and I don't know if it's just like homerism or biasness. I mean, Mark even kind of mentioned this, is like we didn't match their intensity to start the game, and you see one or two shots falling, and it takes a bit, at least a while, and something to bounce the right way to kind of curb that tide away from the team. Like the momentum is just stacked against you, because once one goes in, now all of them seem to go in. Is what it felt like last night. And I think the biggest talking point outside of one, everyone overreacting, shockingly enough, to probably the worst first half they've played all year.
Right.
And I mean, the Nets scored 40 in the first quarter.
Yep.
And then followed it up with 36. They had 76 points at halftime. The biggest point of the game that I'm taking away is the two big lineup with Chet and Hartenstein. It is not our best lineup currently, nor do I think it will be our best lineup in the playoffs. And I don't know what your thoughts on that. It's not a bad lineup. I mean, you have five fantastic players. I'm talking about the starters with Shea, Dub, Dort, Hartenstein, and Chet. And you can sub out, basically just any of our guards with those two bigs. It's a little clunky. I think in the playoffs, you're going to see it more as like a situational matchup dependent thing, because this team is far and away at its best when, one, there's a 7-footer and then we have four guards around them, but more specifically when Chet's that 7-footer. And that's not a harp on Hartenstein, because he's been phenomenal. He's been obviously the main center for a team that has just been a phenomenal regular season team, historical even. And that's the luxury. Like the Thunder, when they went and signed Isaiah Hartenstein, they did not sign him, I think, to start at the 5 and move Chet to the 4. I think it was more so a signing of what was our biggest weakness in the playoffs last year besides PJ Washington going nuclear. It was the minutes when Chet was off the floor and the rebounding situation. Hartenstein solves both of those, because you either A, can go situational and have two 7-footers on the floor, and he's a bruiser. He can guard the big guys. I think it's going to be very curious when we play Denver how that works. If you start Hartenstein to have him body Jokic one-on-one, and then you have Chet as a roamer against someone so talented like that. But it's not fluid right now. And I don't think it ever will be.
We called that out. We were seeing these games as 28 games or whatever as a way to make that fluid, to find water, to come up to the level of the rest of the team. So, it's only been 7-8 games, right? There's still a lot of time.
I think less than that, but yeah.
Yeah. There's still a lot of time for this two big lineup to figure it out and to become special, because I agree it's probably not our best lineup this year.
We have too good of guards. Our guard depth is too insane.
And I love our ability to switch up top with all those guards, and you lose some of that with the too big lineup. It might not be our best lineup this year, but
it doesn't have to be. That's the perk.
It has to be a lineup, though, right? You have to be able to throw something else at them in for 10 to 15, to 10 minutes a night, so that they can't get comfortable on the defensive end and start to really cause havoc. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, you have to have And Rylan Stiles, who's a great writer for SI, and he does Locked On Thunder. He mentioned it as like almost like a pitcher in baseball, where you have your fastball, you have like a changeup or a curveball, and then the best pitchers like develop like a third pitch just
Right.
to keep you off balance.
Well,
It's
that's
not
what I
going to be
mean.
the one they use to get you out, but it's going to be the one that kind of keeps you guessing.
Yeah, Mark talks about like taking away the other team's fastball, and other teams are obviously going to want to do that to the Thunder, which is Shea, doubling Shea up top and making him distribute the ball. So having that third pitch, that curveball that can disrupt their defense is so important, especially in the playoff setting. So, but you're right, it's
Yeah,
not great right now. But we still have
which
those
is fine.
games. We talked about it. You're gonna watch these games. It's gonna be clunky for a while. We have to get through them, and it will be more fluid because that's just how basketball works. Eventually guys learn how to play with each other and learn where everyone is on the court.
And not only that, it's also specific to this team and the talent level of this team. The team's too talented not to find a way to at least make it work.
Right.
To what extent that it works, it will never compare to Chet at the 5 and 4 guards around him. That is far and away our best lineup, and that's the lineup that people are going to talk about in the playoffs, I think, as the one that wins us however many games we win and how many rounds we win. It's what I think is probably the most curious is one, whenever we get closer to the playoffs, and Mark has said, especially, you're experimenting with these lineups, you're starting the two bigs, what kind of rotation you have in the first half is planned out, I think. Like they're like, okay, we're going to do this tonight to see how Caruso plays next to Chet when Dub is the main facilitator or just some whatever the mix up is. But they're adjusting in the second half. And the second half of games, you can tell that they're like last night. I mean, you're losing at halftime, things aren't going your way. They did not play double big in the second half last night.
Right.
It was Chet at the 5, and he dominated that game. It was the best game Chet's played since he's been back. It wasn't against great competition. The Nets center Nicholas Claxton, he was out. So it's not like he was dominating against Rudy Gobert or whatever.
I mean, their backup center was hitting threes left and
Duran
right.
Sharp. Yeah, he played great. But Chet looked amazing. I think that was a key takeaway. But with the rotations, obviously in the second half, what you're seeing is more so what you will see in the playoffs. But what is going to be interesting is, one, when does Mark kind of shift in the regular season to, okay, are we always starting the two big lineup and then we're switching out of it quickly? Like Hartenstein's coming out or Chet's coming out within like the first dead ball or TV timeout. But then also, which big are you leaving in with Shea and which big are you saving for Dub in the second unit? And I think right now it doesn't matter for Shea. Shea is too good.
I think
Shea, go ahead.
Oh, I just think it's pretty obvious, but what were you going to say first?
Well, I'm hoping we're on the same wavelength here because it's Chet and Dub and leaving Hartenstein with Shea, in my opinion.
I agree. I think the way that Hartenstein set screens for Shea gets him wide open, and he can just shred a defense. And then I think
because they're not doubling Dub, they're only doubling
Right.
Shea. So
Right.
you have that second playmaker, and Chet's a playmaker, but Hartenstein's more looking to like facilitate for others.
right,
Chet is a bit more, I don't want to say selfish, but like his playmaking is him going and scoring. Hartenstein's is putting other people in
Right.
position to go score.
right. And so I think those two combinations. I don't know if the stats back that up, the advanced stats, the nerd stuff, but I would say it feels like those are the best two combinations of those four. You know what I mean?
Well, it's been such a point of Dub struggling to generate offense. He's not as efficient this year as he was last year, especially in the fourth quarter. Last year, Chet played every single game, and Chet was in every fourth quarter with Dub to start it. And same for the second quarter. And this year, it's been him and Hartenstein. And obviously, kind of the minutes have changed, and they never obviously do it the same way with experimenting and tinkering. But Chet is far and away the best option for Dub because it creates a second person that can go get a shot. I mean, Chet's not going to sit there and like break you down and do what Shea does or even what Dub does, but he's enough of a threat himself to, one, shoot it, and two, he can put the ball on the floor, especially because if you have a big on him, he's going to drive past you. And then if you put obviously a smaller guy, he can shoot over you.
Right.
It's a great problem to have. This depth is amazing. I mean, 10 years ago, the Thunder would have killed to have half this depth.
100%. They couldn't get a starting five with this, with that kind of depth.
No, it was like whoever was the buyout of the year was playing the 5th or 6th most minutes in the playoffs every year. Shout out Karam Butler and Randy Foye.
Shouts out.
Hope they're doing well. But like Twitter, they get up in arms about it a little bit. Again, this team is 47-11 now. Denver lost tonight, as we discussed before the pod. I mean, it's what did we say, 9.5 game lead in the Western Conference, and almost to the angst of the Thunder fans. It just creates more opportunities for Mark to tinker and experiment because these games don't matter as much because everything's locked up. So buckle up, people.
Buckle up for some real mad scientist shit.
Yeah, Thunder have a 9-game lead on Memphis, 9.5 on Denver.
I don't think Memphis played tonight, though.
No, they didn't. But again, if that expands out, still stays around 9 or 10 games, it does nothing but great things for Shea and the MVP, which I think he's going to win regardless. But if it's a almost 10-plus game gap, I don't know how you give it to the other guy. So,
I think there'll be some riders that would give it to the other guy.
I don't care. As long as it's less than 50%.
That's a good point. That's a really good point.
Another thing last night, shout out to Case and Wallace. That dude's fourth quarter. I mean, flip was switched. I mean, I tweeted out during the game at Ball Talk Pod, okay. The fourth quarter last night was basically a polar opposite of the fourth quarter in the Minnesota game.
Right.
That was the fourth quarter we saw all last year, where if a game was in a balance, if we were losing or if we were winning by a little bit, Shea would come back in to either a giant comeback that's already happened and he just has to go win the game, or he doesn't even have to come back in.
Right. Which has happened a lot this season too.
Yeah.
I mean, he's set the most fourth quarters of any player, right? I think he's like.
Yeah, it's in the teens. It's like 15 or 16 games
he hasn't
played.
Crazy. And they have a 9.5 game lead or 9-game lead. I mean, it's crazy.
Well, that's one of the bullet points for Shea's MVP argument is he's leading the league in scoring. He's doing all this, and he's played like the 14th most minutes in the league, I think, last I checked. Like he's not even playing top 10 minutes or top 5 minutes. Like Jokic, I haven't looked. He's got to be top 5, maybe number 1, because Denver is awful when he's off the court. But all that to say, going back to it, that flip was switched in the fourth quarter last night. Kaysen had 2 steals. One, he picked Killian Hayes, who was like a draft bust for Detroit, and all of a sudden decided to become Steph Curry for a night in Brooklyn. Kaysen picked his pocket. Like the momentum was kind of starting to build for the Thunder. He picked the pocket, went, scored, immediately got it. And then he read a fast break that Brooklyn had and picked off a pass at half court and went and dunked it. And it was like, okay, we're fine now. Because at that point it was still kind of up in the air.
Right.
Yeah, it was crazy. I don't remember what the spread was before the game, but it was definitely double digits. And this team went from being down 18 in the first quarter. They won by 8, but that's because the Nets hit some threes at the very end. But they went from down 18 to covering. Well, it was 17.5. So we weren't close to that, but they got up 14 in the fourth after being down so much throughout the game. So much easier on the eyes, much easier on the panic meter watching that fourth quarter. They're back in action tomorrow night against the Atlanta Hawks. Alex Caruso is out for rest, which I think you'll kind of start seeing more and more because he's a guy that we don't need to see any more of what he can do. The whole NBA knows what he can do outside of how does he fit with other people, mainly Chet now that he's back. But everyone else should play. It's not a second night of a back-to-back, so Chet should be healthy and available. The Hawks have not been great. They're kind of in that like 9, 10, 11 range. We technically need the Hawks to keep winning to keep Philadelphia out of it. But I also know that Philadelphia is probably just going to lose every game from here on out because they're awful.
They're so bad.
They lost by they got down 50 to Chicago, the Fighting Josh Giddeys.
Which is just thinking about Josh Giddey leading a team to leading a team to defeat another team by 50 points is crazy.
Hey, he's got that Thunder DNA. He's got the Thunder DNA. But yeah, they're back in action tomorrow night in Atlanta. Should be a relatively healthy squad outside of Caruso, and then AJ Mitchell still is out, which we should be approaching some kind of update on him. But
I think Atlanta's pretty injured. I think
their second best player is out for the year. His name's Jalen Johnson. He's a third-year player out of Duke. He was going to win Most Improved Player, but then he tore his labrum a couple weeks ago before the All-Star break. So bad break for them. But they still have some guys. I mean, obviously everyone here knows Trae Young in Oklahoma, who's had an all-star season. He's leading the league in assists. They have, the Thunder have the stats that they show before each home game, and everyone goes crazy when the steals stats come up because 3 Thunder players are in the top 10. And I think it's even top 5 or 6. But they're all chasing one man, and it's Dyson Daniels, who plays for the Atlanta Hawks, who has over the Great Barrier Thief.
They call him, he's from Australia. What a great nickname.
It's amazing. One of the best ones. But he's averaging 3+ steals a game. So they still have some talent. They're scrappy. I like the Thunder to get the job done, shockingly enough. Honestly, I think I could say that every game the rest of the year. But
you should.
It's just another opportunity to see what this team can do with the double bigs and just keep gearing up for that postseason run.
Yeah, I agree. There's, besides looking at lineups and things like that and how Chet's coming back, it's really just about preparing yourself. Every loss from here on out, preparing yourself for the playoffs, hardening your spirit like a sailor, going out to sea for a long voyage with no land in sight. You have to be strong this playoffs. So keep strong and keep cheering on.
I mean, I can't say it better than that. I can't. Be a sailor today, people. But with that, we're going to wrap it up a little early. We'll be back next week with a recap of the weekend's happenings, and appreciate everyone for listening. We will see you guys again next week. See ya.
See ya.
All night long. Party, party. We like to party, party, party all night long.